A motorcar hums through wet city streets. Gaslight smears across glass. Inside, two strangers who have just been made husband and wife. The ring was still warm on her finger when Lucian Vale, Duke of Sedgemoor, finally looked at his bride and told her the truth. "You should know what this is," he said, every word cut from ice. "I did not marry you to save you, Miss Caro. I married you to bury your father's name beneath mine. Caro Couture, the Caro fortune, the Caro legacy. By spring, none of it will exist, and you will watch me end it." Rain ticked against the window. A lesser woman would have wept. A frightened one would have begged. Ren Caro smoothed one glove, slow as a queen, and turned her dark eyes on him with something close to pity. "My father destroyed your mother. That's the story you've been fed since you were a boy in mourning black." Her voice did not tremble. "You've spent 15 years sharpening this knife, and tonight you finally get to use it." She tilted her head. "There's only one problem, Your Grace." His jaw tightened. "Enlighten me." "My father couldn't have written the letter that ruined her." She leaned in, close enough that he caught the scent of ink and jasmine. "He was illiterate until the day he died. He signed his name with a thumbprint." The colour drained from the Duke's face. "So before you bury anyone," Wren whispered, "you should ask your uncle why my father's handwritten confession is locked inside his private safe." The car slows, iron gates. A house full of secrets opens its mouth to swallow them both. Pause. The narrator speaks softly, intimately, as if to one listener in the dark. "Have you ever been handed a story about yourself by someone who never asked if it was true? Have you ever been underestimated by a man who thought your silence meant surrender? Only for him to learn, far too late, that you were never the one who needed saving. If you have ever rebuilt your dignity from the ashes of someone else's lie, then Wren's story belongs to you. Tell us in the comments where in the world you're listening from tonight. And subscribe, because here we tell stories of fierce women who refuse to break, and the powerful men who fall for them anyway. Now, let's go back to where it began. 6 months earlier, the new British Empire, a city of motorcars and candlelight, of telephones in marble halls and dukes who still rule the season. They called her the most dangerous woman in fashion, and she had not yet turned 25. Ren Caro, designed for women the empire would rather not see. Widows who refused to stay grey. Debutantes who wanted pockets, ladies who dreamed, scandalously, of trousers. Her atelier on Vesper Street had no gilded sign, only a window where a single garment hung each week like a dare. The aristocracy whispered that she was her father's daughter, Ambrose Caro, the self-made textile baron whose mills had clothed an empire and whose name, since one terrible winter, had been spoken like a curse. She wore that name like armour. Across the river, in a house where every clock was kept 10 minutes fast, and no window had been opened in 15 years, lived the man who hated her without ever having met her. Lucian Vale, Duke of Sedgemoor, 32, broad-shouldered with the still, watchful stillness of a man who had taught himself never to want anything he could lose. He had been 17 when his mother, the Dowager Duchess Honoria, was destroyed by a published letter and a society that fed on her ruin. He had buried her in the rain. He had sealed her rooms, and he had built his entire grown life around a single glittering promise: that the Caros would pay. His uncle, Lord Crispin Vale, had whispered that promise into him for 15 years. What neither man understood, what Wren herself was only beginning to suspect, was that Honoria Vale had once loved fashion the way Wren did, recklessly, rebelliously, and that the truth of her death had never been buried at all. It had only been waiting for the right woman, with steady hands and nothing left to fear, to walk through the gates and tear the whole beautiful lie apart. Ren Caro knelt on the workroom floor in a man's shirt and ink-stained trousers, pins between her teeth, draping bronze silk over a dress form as though she were sculpting flame. She was not beautiful in the way the magazines demanded. Too tall, too sharp at the jaw, with a wide, unsmiling mouth and dark eyes that catalogued everything. Her black hair, was pinned up carelessly with a drafting pencil. When she stood, she moved like someone who had never once apologized for the space she occupied. "You're doing it again," said Greer, her business partner, a freckled woman with copper curls and a ledger of bad news. "That gown is for the Marchioness of Daventry, and you're making it look like a weapon." "All my gowns are weapons." Wren stepped back. "Hers just gets a sharper edge." Greer set the ledger down. The numbers in it had teeth. 3 suppliers had withdrawn that month. 2 clients had cancelled. Always the same murmured reason, never spoken aloud. Caro, the Caro name. 15 years dead, and still her father's disgrace clung to everything like smoke in wool. "We have 11 weeks, Greer said quietly. "Then the lease, the looms, all of it. Gone." Wren said nothing. She crossed to the window where her week's dare hung, a riding habit cut for a woman to actually ride, not merely to be looked at. She had been told it was indecent. She had sold 4 before noon. A motorcar door slams in the street, heavy, expensive. The bell above the door did not ring so much as recoil. A footman in storm grey livery filled the doorway, and behind him the cold gleam of a crest Wren knew from the society pages. A raven overcrossed, reads, Sedgemoor. He held out a single cream envelope sealed in black wax. "His Grace the Duke of Sedgemoor," the footman intoned, "crests the honour of Miss Caro's company, tonight. He suggests she not keep him waiting." Greer's face went white as muslin. "Wren, the Duke of Sedgemoor. Do you know what his family says about yours?" But Wren was already turning the envelope over in her stained fingers, her pulse a slow, dangerous drum. "Oh, I know exactly what they say," she murmured. A smile touched her mouth, not warm, curious. "I've simply never been invited to say it back." He kept her waiting 23 minutes. She counted and let him see her counting. When the Duke of Sedgemoor finally entered, Wren understood why the city called him the Cold Star. Handsome enough to draw every eye, distant enough to freeze them. He wore black without mourning, a watch chain of dull gold, and an expression that had clearly never lost an argument. "Miss Caro," he did not offer his hand. "You came dressed as a man." "I came dressed as myself." She lowered into the chair he hadn't offered. "If that resembles a man to you, Your Grace, the problem is your imagination, not my tailoring." A muscle ticked in his cheek. He was unused to being met. He went straight to the blade. He proposed marriage, not as romance, but as restoration. He would lend the Caro house his name, his patronage, his bottomless wealth, her debts erased, her atelier saved, her father's stain, at long last, scrubbed clean by ducal respectability. It was, he said, a mercy. Wren let him finish. Then she laughed, low, genuine, infuriating. "You don't rescue the daughter of the man you hate, Your Grace. You're not offering me a hand. You're offering me a leash." She rose, circling the firelight. "You mean to own the Caro name so you can strangle it quietly, a merger before the funeral?" For one heartbeat, he looked almost impressed. Then the shutters came down again. "And yet you'll say yes." "I will." Her bluntness startled him more than refusal could have. "Because I want something this room can give me and nothing else can. A season at the centre of society, where every duchess who ever snubbed me will be forced to wear my work. You want my name to die? I'll use your name to make mine immortal." She extended her hand, ungloved, ink still ghosting the knuckles. "We can hate each other beautifully, Your Grace. Shall we?" He stared at the offered hand as though it might bite. Then slowly, against every instinct that had governed 15 years, he took it. Her grip was warm and certain and entirely unafraid, and something in the careful architecture of him shook loose at the contact, though he would have died before naming it. "You'll regret this," he said. "Possibly." Wren smiled, "but not as much as you will." The wedding lasted 9 minutes and felt like a sentencing. No family on her side but Greer weeping into a borrowed handkerchief. No warmth on his. Lord Crispinvale stood as witness, silver-haired, smiling, soft-handed. with eyes that moved over Wren like a man appraising livestock he intended to sell. "So this is the little seamstress," Crispin had murmured at the register, just loud enough. "How resourceful of you, Lucian, marrying the poison to control the dose." Wren had filed his face away. She never forgot a face that smiled while it cut, and then the carriage, the cold confession. "I married you to bury your father's name." And her answer, the thumbprint, the illiterate man, the safe, the words that had drained him grey. Now, if he sat across from her in furious silence as Sedgemoor Hall rose from the dark, a vast grey house with 60 windows and not a single light burning in any of them. "My uncle keeps no confession of your father's," Lucian said at last, though his voice had lost its certainty. "You're grasping. Then you've nothing to fear from my asking." Wren watched the house swallow them. "Tell me, Your Grace, in 15 years, has anyone ever questioned the story you were handed? Or did grieving feel better than wondering?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. Inside, the hall was a museum of someone else's pain. Sheeted furniture, stopped clocks, a staircase that climbed toward a corridor sealed with a velvet rope and dust thick as snow. A severe woman in housekeeper's black met them. Mrs. Pruett, 30 years in service, with a face that gave away nothing and noticed everything. "Her Grace's rooms are prepared," she said. Then, with the faintest flick of her eyes toward the sealed corridor, "The east wing remains as His Grace wishes." Closed. Wren followed the look. At the top of the stairs, just visible past the rope, hung a portrait turned deliberately to face the wall, its gilt frame furred with neglect. "Who is that?" Wren asked softly. Lucian's whole body went rigid. "No one. Good night, Duchess." He left her in the dark, but Wren did not go to bed. She stood at the foot of the stairs, long after his door closed, staring up at the painting that had been turned away from the world. At the woman someone had tried very hard to make everyone forget. By the end of her first week, Wren had committed 100 small treasons. She opened windows. She lit the dead rooms. She returned the stopped clocks to honest time and ordered the dust sheets burned. She walked the corridors in tailored trousers and a man's waistcoat cut to her own narrow waist, and when a footman gaped, she handed him a curtain rod and put him to work. The staff did not know what to make of her. They had been trained to tend a tomb. She was treating it like a house that intended to be lived in. Lucian watched it happen the way a man watches weather he cannot stop. He told himself her warmth was an invasion. He told himself the colour she trailed through his grey halls was an insult to his grief. He told himself a great many things and believed fewer of them each day. He found her one evening in the library, perched on the rolling ladder, drafting by candlelight in a pool of gold. She had pinned a sketch to the shelf beside her, a coat, severe and magnificent, cut for a woman who meant to be obeyed. "You work at night," he observed from the doorway. "I think at night. I work always." She didn't look down. "You're staring, Your Grace. It's either hatred or curiosity. I confess I can no longer tell which." He crossed the room before he had decided to. Up close, in the warm light, the careful coldness he wore like a coat felt suddenly heavy and false. He could smell jasmine and pencil shavings. He could see the ink on her wrist where her sleeve had ridden up, and he had the wild, unforgivable urge to press his thumb to it. "Neither," he lied. Her dark eyes finally met his, and the air between them drew tight as a thread about to sing. A throat cleared. Lord Crispin stood in the doorway, smiling his soft smile, a glass of the Duke's brandy already in his hand. "How domestic," he purred. "Careful, Lucian, you'll forget what she is." Later, when Lucian had gone, Crispin lingered by Wren's ladder. He set one cold hand on the rail beside her bare ankle, not quite touching, all threat. "Whatever you think you'll find in this house, little seamstress," he murmured pleasantly, "I buried it very deep. Don't make me bury you beside it." He smiled and left. Wren did not move for a long moment. Then she looked down at the brandy he'd set on her drafting table, and at the signet ring he'd left a fingerprint of dust upon. The east wing smelled of cold ash and old roses. Wren moved through it like a thief in her own home, candle high, and what she found stopped her breath. Not a bedroom, a workroom. Dress forms shrouded in linen, bolts of impossible fabric gone brittle with age. Sketches, dozens, hundreds, pinned to every wall. The late Duchess Honoria had been a designer, a brilliant one, decades ahead of her time. Wren turned slowly, and tears she had not permitted in years stung hot, because every line on those walls spoke the same rebel language she had spent her whole life learning alone. Here was a kindred ghost. Here was the mother the empire had erased, and there, tucked behind a turned portrait, the same one from the stairs. Half a letter, the rest torn away. Cannot let them marry. If the houses of Vale and Carrow are ever joined, the truth of what I did will surface, and I will hang for it. Far easier to make them hate. A forged letter, the right words in the right ears, and Ambrose Carrow will carry my sin to his grave. She suspects. Honoria suspects everything, and so she must be the one to fall. The hand was elegant, educated, not her father's thumbprint scrawl. It was the same looping script as the note Crispin had left on her drafting table. The candle gutters. A floorboard groans behind her. She does not turn yet. 3 nights later came the Daventry ball. Wren's first as a duchess, and the whole of society arrived to gawk at the poison Sedgemoor had wed. She did not wear what was expected. She descended the great stair in midnight velvet cut like a man's evening coat, bare-throated, no jewels, no apology, and the ballroom forgot how to breathe. The Marchioness of Daventry's own gown, the bronze flame Wren had made, blazed beside her. 2 women, 1 vision, and not a debutante in the room who didn't suddenly despise her own frock. Lady Sybil, the season's reigning beauty, hissed something about trade and gutters. Wren only smiled and said, loud enough to travel, "Envy is so aging, my lady. Do let me design you something to grow old in gracefully." The room laughed at Sybil. A duchess had been made in a single sentence, and across the floor, Lucian Vale watched his bride conquer a world that had broken his mother. Wearing, though he didn't yet know it, a silhouette his mother had drawn 30 years before. His chest ached with something he had no name for and no defence against. Wren had learned 3 things about Crispin Vale. He took his ride at 3. He trusted no one, which meant he relied on no one, which meant the safes combination lived only in his own vain head. And a vain man uses the same numbers everywhere. The date of the old Duke's death, the day he had become, in all but title, Master of Sedgemoor. The tumblers fell on the 3rd try, inside, deeds, debts, a pearl-handled pistol, and a leather folio, soft with handling, tied in faded ribbon. Her hands did not shake. They had waited 15 years for this without knowing it. The folio held everything. The complete forged confession in Crispin's elegant hand, Ambrose Carrow's admission of the affair, and slander that had supposedly destroyed Honoria, drafts of it, practice of her father's name, copied and discarded, because Crispin had not known the man signed with his thumb, and beneath that, the true horror. Honoria's own final letters, intercepted, never sent. The Dowager had discovered Crispin embezzling the estate into ruin. She had threatened to expose him, so he had exposed her first, invented a scandal, salted it through society, and let a grieving city tear her apart. He had murdered her with ink and let 2 innocent houses bleed for it, all to keep his stolen grip on Sedgemoor's fortune and its orphaned heir. Lucian's hatred of the Carrows had never been grief. It had been a cage built by the man who profited from his rage. "I did wonder," came the soft voice from the doorway, "how long before the seamstress learned to pick locks?" Crispin stood there. He had not gone riding. In his hand, the soft smile and the pearl-handled pistol's twin, drawn from his coat and pointed almost lazily at her heart. "Give me the folio, Duchess." He stepped inside, closed the door, "and I'll let you choose how the story ends. A tragic accident for the unstable new wife, or a quiet annulment and you vanish back into the gutter and the Caro name dies exactly as Lucian promised. Either way, the truth stays buried. His eyes glittered. You should have stayed a curiosity in a shop window. Wren clutched the folio to her chest, mind racing, heart a war drum, and from the corridor behind Crispin, unheard, unhurried, came the sound of a man's footsteps. Familiar ones. Crispin did not lower the gun. He merely adjusted his smile to include his nephew. Lucian, good. You can hear it from her own mouth, your wife, rifling my private safe, hunting for ways to humiliate this family. Just as I warned you, Caro blood. It cannot help itself. For one terrible heartbeat, Wren saw the old story rise in Lucian's eyes. 15 years of grief reaching for the easiest hand to hold. She did not beg. She did the only thing that had ever served her. She told the truth, plainly, and let him choose. He forged my father's confession. She held up the folio, voice steady as a surgeon's. He practiced the name on these pages. He intercepted your mother's letters. She didn't fall, Lucian. She found him out. He was robbing your estate blind, and she threatened to expose him. So he destroyed her first and handed you a Caro to hate so you'd never look at him. Her eyes did not leave the Duke's. You've spent your whole life as his weapon. He just never let you see whose hand was on the hilt. She's lying, Crispin began. Then put down the pistol, Lucian said softly, and let me read it. Silence. The clock Wren had restarted ticked honestly on the mantel. Crispin's hand wavered, and in that fracture of a second, Wren swung the heavy folio at his wrist, with every ounce of a woman who works iron and looms. The pistol cracked, plaster rained from the ceiling, and Lucian was across the room, pinning his uncle to the wall, forearm to throat. He took the folio. He read his mother's hand. He read his own name, and the lie that had shaped him, and the truth that had been stolen. When he looked up, the cold star had gone out. What remained was just a man undone. Get out of my house, Lucian breathed. Before I forget, I was raised a gentleman. Crispin straightened his coat. Even then. You have no proof I'll let you keep. He sneered and was gone into the corridor, calling for his motor car. The study fell quiet. Lucian turned to Wren, and the apology in him was so vast it had nowhere to go. He reached for her hand, the ink-stained one, and held it as though it were the only solid thing in a collapsing world. You came into this house to use me, he said hoarsely. Why save me instead? Wren's certainty trembled just once, because somewhere along the way, she admitted, I stopped wanting to win, and started wanting you. Crispin struck first, and he struck like a man with everything to lose. By morning, the papers ran the story he had paid for, Duchess of Scandal, Caro's daughter schemes to loot Sedgemoor, photographs of Wren leaving Crispin's study, a source close to the family describing an unstable woman who had married for the title and now plundered the estate. The forged confession folio, the papers said, was a forgery she had made. He had simply turned her own weapon, beautifully, back on her. Society, which had crowned her at the Daventry ball, sharpened its knives by lunch. 2 clients cancelled. Then 5. The bronze flame marchioness sent regrets. Greer found Wren not weeping but working, sleeves rolled, the great cutting table buried in fabric and proof. You should hide, Greer pleaded. Go to the country, let the Duke handle. No, Wren did not look up. I have spent my whole life letting a name written by other people decide what I am. Not anymore. I'm not going to survive this quietly, Greer. I'm going to answer it where the whole empire is watching. She had a plan, and it was audacious enough to be insane. In 10 days came the Empire exhibition, the season's grandest stage, 1,000 guests, the press, the old aristocracy, and a coveted closing showcase she had been promised before the scandal and not yet, technically, been stripped of. She would not give a statement. She would give a collection. Mrs. Pruett arrived at dusk by hired car, having quietly defied her dukedom, carrying a trunk inside. Honoria's original sketches smuggled from the East Wing, and the letters in the Dowager's own unmistakable hand. The genuine ones, the ones Wren had photographed before the folio ever fell into dispute. A forger, it turned out, leaves drafts, and a clever woman keeps copies. Her Grace would have wanted them seen, the old housekeeper said simply. She drew the future, and they buried her for it. Show them, my lady. And Lucian came to Vesper Street at midnight, hat in hand, no title left in his voice. He did not ask her to come home. He did not try to fix it for her. Tell me what you need, he said, and I'll stand wherever you put me. Wren looked at the man who had finally learned the difference between owning a woman and standing beside one. I need you to do nothing, she said gently, until I tell you. And then I need you to tell the truth out loud, in front of everyone who taught you to fear it. The runway was a river of white light, and the whole cruel, beautiful world had come to watch Wren Carrow burn. She let them wait. Then the music fell, and her collection walked. She had called it Honoria. Garment after garment poured down the light, the late Duchess's stolen visions. Finished at last by the only other hand that spoke her language, married to Wren's own fearless cuts. Coats built for power, gowns with pockets and purpose. Morning that turned halfway down the runway into living colour. The audience that had come to jeer found itself, helplessly moved, and above the runway on a vast screen, Wren projected the sketches in their original aging ink, signed with a name society had spent 15 years pretending to forget. Honoria Vale, Duchess of Sedgemoor. The murmur became a roar. Wren stepped onto the runway herself. In severe black, ink still on her wrist, exactly the woman the shop window had first dared the city to see. She did not raise her voice. The hall leaned in to catch it. You were told a story, she said, that this woman fell, that my father pushed her, that a duke's grief was a Carrow's crime. She let the screen change, Crispin's practice pages, the forged signatures. Honoria's true, intercepted letters, enormous and undeniable. You were lied to, by a man who robbed this family, murdered this woman's name to hide it, and handed her son 15 years of hatred to keep him blind. His name is Crispin Vale. Gasps. The press, scribbling like the building was on fire. And there near the front, Crispin himself, risen from his seat, grey now, the soft smile finally, utterly gone. This is slander, he choked. It's evidence, Wren's voice rang. And there's a man here who can confirm every word. Every eye turned, Lucian Vale rose. The cold star, the unreachable duke, walked into the brightest light in the empire and did the thing he had been raised never to do. He told the truth out loud. My uncle forged the confession. My wife uncovered it. My mother was innocent, and so was Ambrose Carrow. His voice broke, and he let it. I married this woman to destroy her family's name. He turned to Wren, in front of all of them. I'd give my own to keep hers, if she'd have it. Crispin bolted. He did not get far. 2 officers and a great many witnesses saw to that. And on the runway, under 1,000 lights, Wren faced the husband who had finally fallen first, and found, to her astonishment, that she had no clever line left, only the truth. They did not fall into each other's arms beneath the lights. That would have been a different, lesser story. Instead, Wren went home to her atelier and waited to see whether the man would come as a duke claiming a prize, or as something braver. He came at dawn, on foot, alone, having walked the whole grey city to reach her. The scandal's reversed by noon, he said quietly from the doorway. Crispin's arrest is on every front page. My mother's name is being spoken with honour for the first time in 15 years. He paused. Your father's too. Yours most of all. No. Wren did not turn from her cutting table. Her hands, for once, were still. I read it. The Empire's most dangerous woman, vindicated. A breath. It's strange. I built my whole self around being underestimated. I'm not sure who I am to people who finally see me. Lucian crossed the room slowly. The way a man approaches something he is afraid to startle. Then let me tell you who you are. He stopped close, not reaching, leaving the choice, as he had finally learned to do, entirely hers. You are the woman who walked into a tomb and made it breathe, who saved the man who swore to ruin her, not because she was soft, but because she was just. I did not marry you for love, Wren. God help me, I married you for revenge. His voice dropped, raw and certain, and I have never been so grateful to have been so completely, so thoroughly defeated. I fell first. I'll happily fall every day for the rest of my life, but only if you choose it. I won't own you. I'll only stand beside you, if you'll let me stay. Wren looked at him for a long, long moment, at the cold star melted down to a man worth the trouble. I have terms, she said. A real smile broke across his grave face, the first she'd ever seen unguarded. Of course you do. My house stays mine. My name stays Caro beside yours, not beneath it, and you will never again let another person tell you who to hate. Agreed, he said. Agreed. Agreed, and then, because she had decided it, and because for once in her life she wanted something with no strategy attached, Wren Caro closed the last inch between them and kissed her husband, as the morning poured gold through the window of the shop that had refused to die. He kissed her back like a man who had finally, after 15 frozen years, come home. A year on, the gilded sign Wren had once refused finally hung above the door, though not the name anyone expected. Caro Vale, it read, hers first, by his insistence. The atelier had become an empire of its own. Widows wore colour, ladies wore pockets and, scandalously, trousers. Every great house in the season now waited on the word of the Duchess, who designed, and the east wing of Sedgemoor Hall had been reopened at last. Not as a tomb, but as a studio, Honoria's sketches framed in honest light. Her name carved above the door her son had sealed for half his life. Crispin Vale had a different address now, and bars on its windows. In the long library where they had first clashed, the clocks all told honest time, and the windows stayed open to let the house breathe. Lucian Vale sat reading in the gold of evening, and looked up, as he always did now, the moment his wife entered a room. He had spent 15 years training himself never to want what he could lose. He had given it up entirely. He wanted everything. He wanted her. Wren crossed to him, ink on her wrist, a new sketch in her hand, something small, soft, impossibly tender, cut for a person not yet arrived. I've got a new commission, she said, laying it in his lap. Rather a long-term client. He looked at the tiny garment. He looked at his wife. And the man who had married for revenge laughed out loud, helpless with joy, and pulled her into his lap, as the bells of the city rang out across a world that had finally got the story right. She came to that house to be buried beneath a powerful man's name. She left it with her own carved in gold, a fortune restored, a truth unburied, and a duke who would spend his life grateful he ever underestimated her. Because the empire never learns the same lesson twice. But it always learns it from a woman they swore would break. Have you ever watched the world underestimate a woman, only to regret it for the rest of its life? Tell us where you're listening from tonight. And subscribe, because next time the scandal is darker, the love is fiercer, and the woman they tried to bury comes back wearing a crown. We'll see you in the next story.